So now that you've reached a few months of sobriety, should you still be spending all your time sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous? I have a better take. Instead of still sitting in a circle, how about now using that time to advance to the best version of yourself in the career field? Stay tuned and I'll tell you how. As I've said in many episodes prior, it is essential in the recovery from alcoholism that one reconstructs his 4 planes of being, which were badly damaged during his time as an addict. For the path of recovery to cure isn't just about not consuming the offending substance anymore, whether it be alcohol or drugs. It is what the definition of recovery essentially means: to bring your being from one that was ill to one that's now functioning normally. I will add that this also entails walking on a trail where by the end, he has transformed to the best version of himself that he can be. Now, I've said many times, this is the fundamental difference between my philosophy and that of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't believe you can be cured. They believe you're always an addict. It's always a tragedy to me when they tell me of their, quote, success stories of being sober for 20 plus years, yet are still living in the rooms believing they are these sick people. When you're dedicating your life to this mantra, you are not enhancing yourself. You're just living in fear as the remaining addict. You're not advancing your planes. You're simply existing sober. The minority who actually stay sober, that is, which any scrap of brain would tell you this is evidence that the program is a failure. Not only should one recover from alcoholism, become cured from the affliction, but should bring his planes of being to a state that was far superior to before the time he even began the addiction. For the former addict wasn't holistically sound long before he met John Barleycorn, most likely. Alcoholics usually had traumatic backgrounds of abuse. In Johnny, he was lying in wait to meet them with his anesthetic for this past trauma. So this past has to be reconciled as well, which alternate non-AA programs address, such as passages. If you take away the origin of why the person became an addict, then you eliminate the need for that anesthetic after you cease the substance abuse. I don't have to mask the pain of childhood and teenagehood any longer, whether it be with alcohol or anything else. I have reconciled it and left that past era where it belongs, in the past. My 4 planes of being, the physical sphere, emotional realm, career field, and spiritual plane, only continue to advance and have since that last drop of liquid jolly joy. I have covered in previous episodes the topic of reinvention of the physical and emotional plane, the physical plane being the foundation of your new mansion, and the emotional being the framework. Now I address the career sphere, the finishing of that structure of your new existence. And this includes making money. Money's not the root of happiness, this is true. But it's also true that poverty will surely lead to misery. I've lived in both worlds, and the planet I prefer is one of financial freedom. Now, it may be countered that there are functioning alcoholics who are tremendously successful. Well, this is true. Charles Bukowski, the famed writer and poet, was an alcoholic. So was Hemingway. There exist corporate tycoons who are alcoholics and are wealthy, but I contend they most likely did not reach their full potential, even though their talent and work effort brought them financial success. Hemingway ended his life. Think how many more brilliant writings he could have produced had he not. Bukowski, he died a miserable example of a human being, filled with anger and depression. In my opinion he wasn't that great of a writer. He only got lucky enough to write in a generation that embraced his depravity. And the tycoon, who is an alcoholic, may have climbed to the high altitudes of the mountain, but he isn't reaching the absolute summit of his talents. I made it through physical therapy school with a drinking problem. I would have done a lot better in that program if I wasn't linked with John Barleycorn every night. Just because someone is successful doesn't mean he is as successful as he could have been. But the vast majority of alcoholics aren't exceptions to the rule like the tycoon or Hemingway during their working lives. Most alcoholics are just counting the hours down every day until they can hit that liquor store back on their way home, so they can drink away the night and spend the first few hours the next morning wiping away the haze from their self-induced fog. The primary focus of the life of an alcoholic is alcohol. Everything else is secondary. I did a decent job during the first 8 years of my craft as a physical therapist. whose master status was really a practicing alcoholic, but I could have done better if I had been sober. I didn't really start the path to master my trade until I broke it off with the addiction. There are two types of self-advancement that one can engage in now that there's no interference from John Barleycorn. The first is the career itself, in which you have chosen. And the first question to analyze, once the liquid tide has receded and the head is cleared, is whether this chosen field remains your calling. Many people, former alcoholic or not, don't like their jobs. And this is a tragedy. But since money doesn't grow on trees, people are forced to spend a great many of their waking hours in their professions. I was fortunate because I had the foresight at 22 years old to know that I didn't know what I wanted to do from the 8 to 5 for decades of my life. So I enlisted into Uncle Sam's orphanage for the wayward with no prospects until I figured it out. That turned out to be a smart decision because the calling to become a medical provider didn't occur until I was 26. I didn't go to physical therapy school until I was 29 and didn't start practicing until 33. I was late to the party, but it's better to be late and content than on time and miserable. I can say, long after those wayward years even matter, that I didn't spend my life doing something I hated. When your mind is cleared of the toxic effect of alcohol, you can evaluate whether you're on the right trail in your walk of life. I recommend this self-analysis for everyone unless they want to reside in the majority of Thoreau's club of most who live in quiet desperation. Having an unfulfilled career is a sure way to destroy the emotional plane, which will suck the energy out of your being. Many in midlife have fallen into this abyss. They are generally in a state of discontent in which they stop advancing everything. They go home and watch Netflix, have 2 or 3 weeks off a year, and hope they can leave it all by 65 to salvage what little they can. They have resigned themselves to a life they really don't like, but are at the halfway mark, so figure they might as well just wait out the rest. And this is not the outlook to have. If you're now clean and sober and realize that you really don't like your profession, now is the time to change it. Yes, it's not easy. There'll be a time when you'll have to be at that job you don't like while training for a different career, whether in the trades or another degree. And most people don't have the will to take on this endeavor. Most don't even have the vision to see themselves doing something else. So they sit in the cubicle every day as their life passes in that state of discontent. If one was capable of drinking every night during the work week, then one can spend those nights getting the qualifications to do something else now that he's sober. If it means downsizing your lifestyle, then so be it, because no one on their deathbed relishes that they had that extra 500 square feet in the house they owned. Possibly you're in the right career. Maybe you picked the one that linked with your Zen before and during your alcoholic days. Well, congratulations to you. Now is the time to excel at it to your maximum potential. Unless you were the exception to the rule, you were probably just getting by every day through your once daily hangovers. But now that you're sober, you step your stride to reach the summit instead of meandering around the base of the mountain. If you're an IT guy, then start getting those certifications. If you're a business guy, then there's the MBA to pursue. There are advanced courses for electricians and other tradesmen. If you are in the career you like, then start being the best at it you can. That energy will overflow into your other planes, as well as keep your being in a state of holistic health. For myself, it was physical therapy courses and continuing education. I wanted to be a physical therapist before I was an alcoholic, was one during my alcoholism, and am still one today, long after I quit the alcohol for good. I'm mostly retired now, but when I wasn't, I began a path to master joint mobilizations, myofascial release techniques, and muscle rebalancing for my patients. I not only went to yearly courses, but studied 2 hours a week on my own. It was only 2 hours, but I did it every week while I was working. Even though 80% retired today, this is still a practice I continue. I state that if I drop dead at the clinic during one of my infrequent contracts, I hope it was while learning something new. There is no end to progression of self in your career field. But what if you have no real trade, profession, or degree and never have? Maybe you only worked menial jobs your whole life. Well, now's the time to start building yourself up. Maybe you work unskilled labor at 35. No one said it had to be the same at 40. You probably have never considered what you could be because of your prior addiction's focus. Who says you can't become an electrician, mechanic, or executive at 40? I once knew a successful car salesman who decided to become an RN at 55. His friends on the lot told him he'd be 57 before he got his degree. He told him he'd be 57 anyway. Today, he's a traveling contractor just like myself. You don't have addiction holding you back now. There may be some professions that have bypassed you. For instance, I can't apply to the FBI in my 50s, but there are many occupations that most likely haven't passed you by. I know of a graduate from the Alaskan Trooper Academy. He was late 40s when he completed the course. But there are other types of self-advancement besides the basic career that you can now pursue since your days with John Barleycorn are over. Maybe you're fine with your job, but yet want something more. Something to break away from the day-to-day pack that runs in the same circle year after year. Not too long ago, the idea of an internet business wasn't an idea at all. No one could have imagined that you could start a blog, vlog, or even a product business right from your home. The idea of self-publishing on Amazon wasn't possible, as there was no Amazon or cyberspace. You can even start your own sitcom on YouTube if you like. Now, trust me, these internet self-advancement ideas are not easy. They were certainly a lot easier for those who had the foresight when the internet was novel and YouTube was a first-year platform. But the most important takeaway is that it is the pursuit, not the outcome, which gives meaning to life. You cannot run in that race if you're in the stands 3 sheets to the wind when the starting gun goes off. Now you can. I wrote the first draft of my dystopian novel, The Second Fall, when I was in the last years of my alcoholism. I had always wanted to write a dystopian work of offbeat apocalyptic Christ, returning to a world that had fallen into ruin. The first year I began it, in the spring of 2005, I wrote 109 pages. The first edition didn't publish until 2012. It took 7 years because I was drinking every night. If I hadn't been drinking, I would have gotten the first draft, the rewrites, and final edits done in a total of 2 or 3 years. Once I got sober, I not only quickly finished that novel, but published another short fictional book the same year. And then a few years later, I decided to write 2 self-help books, one being the topic of these episodes. I also published a memoir of spiritual reinvention on the Pacific Crest Trail. It took far less time to get these books out now that alcohol was permanently out of my life. But you can't focus on advancement and progression when your master status is still that of an addict, because the people who sit in the rooms most nights focus on their continued sobriety even 10 and 20 years later. You aren't thinking about starting your own business of selling offbeat t-shirts when you're still telling your story of your alcoholic past in that circle of AA's constant negativity. You're just happy that you're sober today and don't know about tomorrow. You aren't thinking about pursuit of excellence or advancement of the career planes. You're thinking about how you're diseased and forever in fear that the remission is only temporary. You won't have the time to devote writing that book because your life revolves around AA. There may be exceptions AA in your rooms, but what I described is the rule. What I'm offering is to leave the alcoholic past behind you. You have stopped drinking. Eventually, the cravings for alcohol will become minimal, transient, and rare. If you are living a holistically healthy life, which is the opposite of what Alcoholics Anonymous offers. Once you reach this normality, this is where you start the path to become the best version of yourself that you can. You aren't simply collecting milestone chips of sobriety. You attempt to reach the summit to greatness. And if one endeavor fails, then you begin another. You can't do this if you're sitting in negativity and never let go of that past, which is exactly where AA keeps you. Most members of Alcoholics Anonymous are so distracted by their cult that they will never consider bringing themselves to a state of excellence. And that is truly a tragedy, because the greatest triumphs aren't from ones who just became successful. They are from those who were once at the bottom of the abyss, climbed to the surface, and then rose to the top of the highest peak itself. And this is where everyone, former alcoholic or not, should direct their walk of life. Now, for some more on how to completely recover your being after alcoholism, go ahead and click on the playlist card at the end of the video, and check out my more detailed guidebook, Reinvention of Self, How to Change Your Life and Being Forever. Link is on the video description as well as a channel page banner. And remember, you made the contract, now keep it. Be sober at sundown, and I will see you at the next sunrise.